All right, folks. Hey, Brian Hoagley with SideChannel, the CEO, and really excited to have today happen. I'm joined today by our head of sales, Trent, and our CTO, Nick, and we are really stoked and just, very impressed with what the team has done, the messages that we have for you, and what we're going to go over with Enclave. If you saw the announcement on Tuesday of this week, we released a new feature set, and a lot of that is because we listen to you, the users, the customers, folks who are looking for a better solution to be able to address the variety of things that we're actually going to go over today. It's actually a plethora of technology and features, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice in a quick overview. Nick is actually going to dive into that. But let's start first with some introductions, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. So, hey, everybody, my name's Trent. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sales here at SideChannel. To reiterate what Brian said, we're really excited to be bringing these new Enclave features to you all today. We've gotten a lot of great feedback, as Brian said, from current clients and from prospective clients that we've been chatting with, and found that what we're going to be talking with you about today fits directly into the Enclave platform that we're bringing to you and continuing to expand on. So to our current clients, thank you for your feedback. To prospective clients and CISOs that we've been chatting with, your voice is heard, and we're really excited to be bringing this to you today. Nick, I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Trent. Hey guys, it's Nick, CTO over here at SideChannel. Really thanks again. Just want to echo the appreciation to all the feedback we've gotten, and really try to listen to everybody and kind of get all that messaging into the platform so you guys can utilize these new features for all your needs. So thanks again. Appreciate it. Looking forward to kind of showing you around. So thanks.
All right, thanks guys. So I want to just do a quick overview of what we're going to talk about, and then we're just going to go right into the demo with Nick. So the new features that we have out are underneath a new module that we refer to as asset inventory. And what we're now able to do with Enclave in a deployment is be able to handle asset discovery. So you can find unknown assets on a network, track and manage those assets, basically looking for and monitoring all the devices and applications within a network, do the level of reporting and compliance that you want out of a system like this to give you a detailed inventory, and generally give you better enhanced visibility and gain insights into unused or underused assets within your organization, potentially maybe even finding some levels of optimization with your IT teams, or even some potential cost savings on assets that you may necessarily need inside of your environment. But that's not enough. We went a little further and said, hey, since we're already on an endpoint, we're looking at asset inventory, why don't we also look at the vulnerabilities of those assets, like the software, third-party software, or the operating systems. So now we have the ability with Enclave to be able to handle real-time vulnerability scanning, prioritization management of those vulnerabilities, really be able to characterize the vulnerabilities based on severity, the potential impact. Again, looking at things like the CVSS score, pulling data out of the NVD, and giving that information to you about, well, what's running on these endpoints? Are they vulnerable? How vulnerable are they? And allow me to start prioritizing what to go address inside of my environment. But again, that's not enough. And I'm a big fan on documentation. If anybody follows me on CISO Life, as I kind of talk about policies and documentation, it's the thing that auditors are looking for. It's the thing that we as CISOs are always wanting. And our ability now with Enclave is to have a visual mapping and create real-time visual maps of the information that's inside of your network, what Enclave can see, again, based on what the assets are, the software inventoried in that environment, the hardware inventoried in that environment, the vulnerabilities on that software, the vulnerabilities on the operating systems, and then also the data access and the data flow between systems to be able to see that. So our ability to now present and create all of this underneath one tool is really why we're so excited about what we're able to do with the platform and what Nick is going to be able to go into in detail with this demo. So we're going to go over all the aspects of this. At the bottom of the hour, we're actually going to probably come back and go over some things for people who are joining late, and then just kind of continue the conversation. This will be available as a replay on LinkedIn Live, and then we'll also make it available on YouTube on our channel. So with that, Nick, if you'd like to bring us through the platform that is Enclave.
Yeah, will do. Thanks, Brian. All right, I should be sharing my screen here. Hopefully you're all seeing that. So we really kind of, if you've seen sort of this demo before, you've walked through the platform a little bit, you'll notice that already things are looking a little bit different. So we wanted to incorporate this new module inside of the current system. And so that really made us rethink how we actually, display a new dashboard and how do you navigate between these different modules. And so we redesigned this whole dashboard and now really kind of giving you some basic information across the system, right? So we can see now there's assets, users, nodes, enclaves, all these different kind of components in the system that we really just kind of wanted to highlight. So if you wanted like a general view or general status or health of the entire system and what it's looking at, now we're presenting that to you. But really, we want to dive into these new features like immediately. So I'm going to dive into these assets, the assets module, and now we're presented with the assets only dashboard. And so we've basically created a high level dashboard for everything, and then each module has specific dashboarding for it, which can also actually be modified, right? So if I want to like pull off some of these things, or I want to move some stuff around because I don't like the way that that Nick likes to view things, then you have that ability now, as well as creating new dashboard elements, which I'll get into here in a second. But really, kind of the core of this is really an asset inventory system, as Brian had mentioned. And we didn't go into this thinking, hey, the world needs another asset management system because why not, right? Like that's really not what the impetus was here. It was really thinking about from a networking perspective, how do I create secure connections to machines? And well, that first step that I needed is that identification step, right? I need to understand what's out there in order for me to be able to start, planning on what those networks, those subnets are going to look like, or those segments are going to look like, and then actually protecting those things. So we really took this like 3-phased approach to doing this. And this asset management system or asset inventory module is that first component. We're identifying all the things that are out there. Like Brian said, we're inventorying all the software, we're inventorying all the hardware that we can see, and then displaying that for you. Some added bonuses, because we were doing the work in there and we had some extra time, we're like, well, let's go ahead and just vulnerability scan all the software on there. And so you can see on the left, or on the right-hand side, the various CVE, reporting views that we have. And so we have some high and critical systems that we can see. And we also just have a generic CVEs exist across different assets. And we can kind of dive into those and see which assets have these CVEs and the severity for each of them. So that's the core part of the system here. But as we dig in and really kind of look at the different elements of the software inside the asset management asset inventory piece, what we're doing here is really looking at all of the different systems that exist. We're detecting whether something is in a container or if it's ephemeral or not, or if something's an actual live system, but does not have an agent installed on it. So we found assets that were not part of our Enclave network, or did not have an agent installed on it. So there's all these different capabilities kind of inside of this platform now that really allow you to get a better visualization across the whole network here.
And Nick,
yeah, Brian, please.
So that's a great point to kind of hone in on. So Enclave is deployed as an installable agent on any type of Windows, Linux, or Mac operating system. And the area that you've just explained allows those deployed Enclave agents on corporate assets to now be able to discover other assets that don't have Enclave or other assets in the environment, right? So the ability to really understand what else is going on in the environment that my Enclave protected device is in.
That's exactly right, Brian. So, and the key to that is really just getting this agent to do more. And so we're packing more functionality down at the agent level, pulling that information back up into this single pane of glass so you can see what's going on across everything, and really getting an idea there of what exists on the network and maybe what you didn't know about, or what you did know about and an agent didn't get deployed to because of whatever mechanism failing. So inside of the system, we also, like we talked about, we have this ability to detect CVEs, so detect vulnerabilities across assets, whether that's an operating system CVE or just a user space software CVE. We're detecting all of those things and then populating them for those assets and really kind of building them inside of this dashboard. Building them inside of the Explorer module, which you can then search and filter to discover those different different vulnerabilities across the map there. We also, something we added inside the system was ability to tag different resources. So, we get it. CVEs aren't equal across the board, right? Some critical CVEs may not matter because that resource doesn't really matter, or you're not utilizing that software somewhere. But what we can do is detect what systems exist out there. We can tag systems with various with various levels or various tags to allow you to categorize them in a way. And one that we have, built in here is a business critical function, right? So I'm going to add, this container, which is a pretty cool function. We can actually scan on the container whether there's software that's has known vulnerabilities to it, and then apply that to our filter now. So if I go back to my my system here and go through and find all of the different vulnerabilities that exist across the system, but I only want to see things that exist that are business critical. Well, now I can see, like I have a business critical container out there that has some CVEs associated with to it. If I want to add that to the dashboard, because that's something that I want to see all the time, I can do that. And I can do CVE. If I could spell here.
And this becomes like really, really important for the practitioner, because now you're really kind of pulling in these traditionally IT-centric functions with cybersecurity aspects. And I think what we've really kind of talked about, and while SideChannel is a cybersecurity company, we always recognize that cybersecurity is based on good architecture and engineering within IT. So having a good asset inventory, again, if you're a big fan of control frameworks, like a lot of us are, the first two things at a CIS are, hardware and software inventory. You've got to know what you have in your environment. You can't protect what you don't know exists. So pulling in the asset inventory capabilities that Nick's overviewing here and drawing that in and having a full understanding of what do I have in my environment to now couple that with this vulnerability insight becomes really, really important, not just for security, but for IT management and engineering and networking teams. And this, in the hands of those types of groups, just becomes, for us, a real game changer underneath one product.
Absolutely, Brian. And I think, the one thing that I would add to that is now this is like the foundation of where I see, secure remote connectivity happening. This gives us the foundation to really start now profiling what we think a safe asset is. So not only do we have to rely on identity, right? We're not going to say, okay, the IAMS is going to know who that person is, and we're just going to trust that. We're going to make that assumption. We can now start looking at other aspects. Do they have the appropriate software installed? Do they have software installed that does have a CVE? We can limit that. We can stop somebody from being able to connect now if they have some of these things in there, because now the system is aware of those things. And as well, we can also report these things out to your other systems, right? I'm not trying to turn this into, the security operating center dashboard. That's not what our plan is here for this. We really want to, focus on the things that we're doing and then be able to report out to those systems that you're already using to provide them with the context that they need in order to make the appropriate action. So again, if you did want to pull an asset off the network, you can do all of that programmatically from our API, right? So if there is a SOC out there or a SOAR platform that you have, and we're able to show, hey, the system has some CVEs associated with it. Do you want to completely pull that off of the secure remote connected network? We can do that now. We can kind of orchestrate all of those things through all the different platforms and integrate them fully into your system. You don't just have to buy the SideChannel platform and then do it there. Go ahead, Brian.
So this becomes not only really kind of appealing to the CISO and their team if they're a large enough enterprise, but this now becomes a really good play and an available option for MSPs and MSSPs to really start using inside of their entire client base. Trent, do you want to maybe touch on kind of our early users and the use case that they had from the MSP standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely, Brian. So one of our clients did come to us with this approach and said, hey, listen, first off, we'd love to deploy this on our own network to make sure that everything is secure and we're getting everything that we need. In addition to that, though, this client also had a strong use case with multiple clients that they had where they identified these needs And it was a very natural partnership. And so that's one thing that our team is really focused on here at SideChannel for Enclave, is making sure that these solutions that we build are also very applicable to the MSPs and the MSSPs out there. Our goal is to make this a turnkey solution for your clients that are going to be out there as well, to make it easy to partner with them.
Yeah, the same underlying infrastructure that larger enterprises are using to defend their environments with SOAR platforms, any other SIM, any other type of orchestration, are the same type of platforms that MSPs and MSSPs are using to be able to scale their services to their entire client base. And we felt that, the way to develop a product should meet the needs of both because of their similarities. And this is great because this doesn't necessarily need to be a channel only type of product or a MSSP type of product, but really this is a good security and IT product that can be used by a variety of groups in a versatile way. And again, a lot of why our excitement is like how flexible this is and how many use cases it fits to just address the real needs. And that's the intent of the product, is to really address the gaps that have been identified that we feel have been underserved and ignored for a little too long, whether they've been financially unfeasible or technically a little too hard to actually implement. And the entire purpose of Enclave was to make something that was financially feasible for mid-market, enterprise, and larger, but also easy to roll out. And it actually works. I think that's a big component for us, is actually eating our own dog food, seeing it work, bringing our experience as former CISOs, former executive security leadership in a variety of agencies and organizations into this product to go, this is what we've always wanted. This is what we've always looked for. And that's been a driving component to how Nick and the team have really masterfully developed this product. So with that, Nick, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, thanks. One of the things that I would add to that is, with the MSSP space or MSP space, the big concern for a lot of these platforms is how do you manage multiple users? Typically, it's one single tenant, and you have to just kind of figure out how to organize your different clients that way. We've really thought about that and built multi-tenancy from the ground up. So basically, you only need one agent installed. You can switch between tenants to be able to connect to those networks, or inside the dashboard, you have the ability to switch between tenants to go from one context to another or one client to another. It's actually very simple to do all of those things. So really wanted to kind of bring that into this conversation as well, even at the enterprise level. If multi-tenancy is something that wants to be done, whether there's U.S. assets and European assets, and you want to just utilize them completely separate tenants, like we can accommodate sort of all of those scenarios and partitioning very easily. So I wanted to mention that as well in this conversation. But with that, the last piece of this that we haven't really talked about is this whole scanning ability. So we can basically set up scans from any set of nodes inside of the system. So anything that has an agent installed on it can be a scanning device from the network. And so we can set the entire network to scan everything and see if it can find other assets. We can scan it. We can use a single device to scan an asset, or to discover if there's any assets. And what it's going to tell us, it's going to say that, hey, there's network connectivity between one device to another device. So we really start to develop this idea of a relationship map from a device perspective, right? What can one device actually touch to and go to another device? So we're building that out. And really, like I said, the purpose of all this wasn't to rebuild technology that sort of exists out there already. It was really to utilize this to be able to get us to that point where we can really secure these connections very easily, and be able to create, those segments or those enclaves, as we call them, to be able to do those and generate those very quickly. As we look through our asset list, we can see there's a couple of found assets in here. So what that's telling us is, a system, we ran a scan on the system, and 2 assets were found that do not have agents on them. Everything else has agents on them and is reporting as normally, except for these 2 assets where they're sitting out there somewhere, and our our control server here was able to detect them. And now we're able to get some information on them. Obviously, it'll be a little bit limited in terms of, what services and systems are running on them, depending on what this particular, asset has. Obviously, we don't have an agent on here, so we're not scanning any software, so we're not able to see that. But what we can see is the relationship that this node has to other nodes on the network. Right now, this is obviously a relatively simple network, so we just scanned from one machine to another, but we can see that, hey, across port 22, this control server was able to see and communicate to that machine there. So we're starting to build this idea of like this connectivity map where we can see what's being connected to, and maybe this is an option, or maybe this is an opportunity for us to secure that connection with an enclave and really microsegment this network out so that now only those two resources can communicate. Because at this point, anything on that subnet or anything that has access to that 10.124 subnet can now hit port 22 on that machine. So if that's an old version of SSH, which is typically running on port 22, and there's a vulnerability associated with that, well, now that's an exposure that's there. With Enclave, what we can do now is see that, visualize what's happening. If there is a CVE there, we can go in and fix it. If there's not, and we want it, or either way, if there is or isn't, we can go ahead and create an enclave around these two systems and now have a secure path for communication between these two nodes. And that's really the kind of the core part of this platform, or really what we're trying to do here is, the rest of this is helping operations and things function from the day to day. But the core part of what we're trying to do is discover what's connecting to what, and then figure out the best way to secure those two things, so that you can remotely or even on-prem have secure communication between those two things, have a zero trust presence across across the network, with basically limiting who can access what. So we know who can access what elements of the network. It's no longer you're connected to the network and now you have access to everything.
So the implementation, right, of segmentation and all of this, Nick, you want to dig a little bit into how we're using software-defined networking and the overlay network to be able to make this all possible? Because this is drastically different than, kind of the hardware implementations of trying to make segmentation happen, obviously, and even some other types of VPN-like solutions. You want to just touch a little bit on what's the Enclave approach to that overlay network concept?
Absolutely. So really kind of the core of what we're, the core that we're building this off of is software-defined networking. And so with that, what we're able to do is create essentially a mesh network, or what's known as an overlay network. And what that is basically a network that we just made up, right? It's associated to a network card on that system, but it's not associated with any VLANs. It's not associated with the network really in any real capacity. So it makes it hard to actually hit that subnet, because that subnet technically doesn't exist anywhere in the network. It only exists in the software. So what we do is we dynamically create these links between all of these nodes that you're seeing here. I know it's a bit of a spaghetti mess on here. This is sort of the whole network across the board here. We can actually dive into an enclave and get a better sense of what a more manageable view of this network looks like. And so we can see the different aspects of a network, or the different accesses that we're granting to to enclaves or segments of the network. And that's the core part of what we're doing. So what we're seeing here is a visualization of where agents exist and what connectivity they have. So we have a couple of groups here. We have SSH access. So there's a bunch of servers on here that are allowing SSH access, and we have a group here that is being granted that access to those servers. So Nick and Don have access to these three servers and can reach these machines across SSH. But the beauty of what we're doing with this overlay network is we're utilizing a lot of the operating system tooling to do this. So it's not, SideChannel didn't go out and develop a whole new network stack, and you have to install that inside the system. We're really just retooling how the operating system handles connections and handles tunneling. And so what we're able to kind of accomplish with that is a very simple way to apply zero trust with zero trust access to all of the systems on a network. So essentially what we do is we take each of these systems and we by default, this can be altered a bit, but basically we want to block all the incoming traffic to any host, and we want to allow outbound. And so what that does is it basically takes that node, that machine off the network. It makes it no longer communicable to anything. Now, each of the nodes, so anytime we want to do, so with the software, anytime we want to make a connection to that node, we initialize that connection, we create some holes in the firewall dynamically, and then we create a tunnel through that that port that was just opened inside of the firewall. We create a tunnel dynamically with that and encrypt all of that traffic. So now, from when I connect or when Don connects to one of these machines, we can see that we can control how that connection happens, and only he and I, or Don and Nick in this case, can access SSH across these three servers. Nobody else in this user list has access to that. Nobody else, whether if they don't have an agent installed and they're just on the network somehow, if it's a guest network and perhaps there's some way to cross over into that. Into the enterprise network, nobody's even going to be able to see these hosts. Nobody's going to even be able to initialize that connection to communicate to these machines. So that's really the core part of this segmentation and the power of it. The other aspect of this, which I really like, is the visualization of this. So the other piece of this, and Brian alluded to some of this earlier, which is being able to visualize how information is traveling across the network. That's really not a network view that IT or security has ever taken. It's always been, hey, show me the network map. Show me the network map, and I'll be able to see kind of how things are communicating. Excuse me. We're now taking this from a different approach. Like, the network map is great, and it's obviously important for the specific things that it needs. But from an access perspective of who has actually access to what resource, like that's a little bit different conversation. And honestly, that's what I want to know, right? What groups have access to what systems in my environment? And maybe, I can obviously blow some of these things out so I can see that, like, okay, so the techie group, which exists in my IAMs, so I know who they are. They have SSH access to these three machines. Like, okay, great. Like that's an audible artifact right there, right? That's showing that you are controlling access to these systems. Yeah, Brian, I mean, like, do you want to kind of go into how and why that's important across from the CISO lens here?
Obviously, whenever you're trying to manage access, right, you want to do it in groups, right? You want your admins kind of grouped together. You want your users grouped together. You want to be able to make sure that you have the right insight into, okay, well, only these three people should have SSH access to this group of systems. So if I want to always grant SSH access, right, I should group and manage it as SSH access instead of granting, Nick and Brian and Trent individually access. So, it's standard stuff that we see within OUs in Active Directory and other group permissions and any other type of like RBAC is really kind of rolling it up where you can, and then applying, saying, hey, okay, this group is allowed SSH, boom, done, good to go. Now, if I need to remove SSH access from that person, I can remove that person from the group instead of having to worry about removing specific accesses from the user account individually, or worst case, having to go into every single asset and server or device and removing that user's access directly inside of those. So by grouping these, and again, a standard, legacy, I think a lot of folks on here are going to kind of scoff and be like, okay, that's great. But we also know that this isn't regularly done as part of like good hygiene inside of environments. So this, again, it's simple. We want to make it simple to do. And that's what I think is really important. While we recognize, yes, this is a basic tenet of how to manage and run a good program, it's regularly still not done. And yet we all kind of wonder why. And it's because it's generally not simple to go do and implement. So our view here was, well, let's solve for that. And I think that's a lot of what you'll see out of Enclave is we're trying to make the things that we know just need to be done, basic tenets of cybersecurity, IT, hygiene. Let's just make those components very easy to do for you, the admin, the provider, the director, whomever it is.
Yep. And Nick, I think one other thing that would be really important to touch on here is, we're talking about implementation and how important that is and ease of use for all of our clients and the MSPs and partners that we have out there. This is a lot of feedback that we get from other ZTNA platforms, microsegmentation platforms, and remote access tools as well, is that standing the tool up can be really challenging. But I think another huge differentiator of Enclave is we're a fully managed solution as well. Nick, could you go into a little bit of detail about what that really means when we say we're a fully managed solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we say that, really the thing that we need you to do, the customer or the end user, is to install the agent across the board, right? So whatever tools you're using to do that, you get the agent out there, you get it running, and then from there, we'll sit down with you and we'll talk through what we're seeing in our asset inventory system. We'll see what connections that we're seeing that people are making to those systems, and then we'll start talking about protecting those systems and creating those segments to it. So we sort of handle all of that. We'll help walk you through all of that. We will even drive the entire platform. So if you want us to manage the entire EMC, we can do that as well. So it's all sort of baked into our offering, which was, another big, as Trent said, it was a differentiator for us. Like, it was a big gap that we saw in the whole space, is that none of the other players in this space were really offering any type of service being kind of bundled in with the offering that they had. It was, hey, here's the software, here's the dashboard, here's the web page with all the support. And so we want to take it a step further there.
Yeah, the piece with this is you can deploy or procure, you can procure Enclave and run it, manage it yourself. Or for a lot of organizations, and specifically SideChannel has been focusing on mid-market companies and small businesses and startups with our services. We understand that they don't generally have the teams or the size of teams or the depth of the bench to be able to run a capability like this. So now we're able to actually provide the back-end managed services and professional services to run a deployment of Enclave for those types of organizations, while still making this available to larger, much more mature teams or organizations that can be able to run this product themselves. So again, a very scalable solution, both up and down organization size and different types of needs, whether you need it for yourself and you can run it, completely possible, or if you need a managed service behind it, and now you're able to get the capabilities, the outcomes of the product without having to hire or manage the staff to be able to run a product like this.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the key things that we did there, I should say two key things that we did is, one, we wanted to make the UI very intuitive, very simple. So not only to make it simple for us to manage, but in case there are people in here who, you don't want to spend 3 weeks learning a new tool. We really tried to make it intuitive and make things very simple to kind of, understand and deploy. Now, I think that helps probably the smaller, companies and organizations out there where, you don't have a ton of time. You guys are doing tons of stuff. People are wearing many hats. So you want this to run very smoothly. So if you want to run it, obviously, like you can run it. Hopefully this is super intuitive and you can run that way. So that's one of the key pieces that we were thinking through. The other is the integration aspect. So we really were thinking through, I don't want to be an IAMS, right? I don't want the system to have an IAMS capability here. We have one, it's very limited, but what I would much rather do is connect to, your Active Directory or, whatever other third-party IAM systems that you might be utilizing, connect to those, pull in all of those, all those users and groups from that system. And then you just have to manage the IAM system, and we'll just follow suit, right? So as people, get added to this group or taken out, they'll either be granted those accesses or those accesses will be removed automatically. So there'll have to be no, no work done on the part of whoever's administering the system here, the EMC. The other kind of key piece to this is not only from an IAMS perspective, but also from a reporting and alerting perspective. So as things are detected on the system, they can be pulled out and pulled into a NOC or pulled into a SOC, based on any orchestration or automation systems that might exist out there. So now we're talking about like the higher end folks who are, in bigger organizations who have more resources to dedicate to larger capabilities. We want to be able to integrate into those systems, right? We don't want you to like, okay, now rip out your IAM system. Yeah, good luck trying to sell that to anybody in the Fortune 500. Like, no, you spent millions of dollars trying to, deploy that IAM system, we want to integrate with that. We want to integrate with your NOC and your SOC to be able to do that. We're not trying to replace any of your capabilities.
And Nick, so what are those IAM systems that we natively have today that Enclave integrates with?
Yeah, currently we're using Google Workspaces. We have Microsoft AD, and we also have AWS's IAMs built in. We have the API built out. We just need to build the integration. So if there is, if there is an IAMs platform that you're using, it will generally take us less than a week to get that integrated into the system, because we've already got like the scaffolding built on our end. We're just waiting for demand to push us into the other directions.
So really the predominant three players in the space, which most everybody's using, AWS, Google, or Microsoft's environments, we have native current capabilities today to be able to integrate with.
That's correct.
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, we're trying to make this simple, folks. Like, we want to make this very easy, because that is what good security looks like, is when you can implement it easily and manage it easily, it will stay, it'll work. And I think this is a great capability that sits in between current capabilities that organizations have, like in their IAMs, making use of those without asking them to drastically change. We have the native ability to be able to integrate with them today, which makes it seamless to be able to roll out. And now you're deploying new types of protections and detections into an environment with what the Enclave product is able to do through, obviously, asset inventory discovery, the vulnerability scanning, the vulnerability discovery, and all of that. Nick, do you want to just maybe, I love the UI. I think it's great what you and the team have done. Do you want to just maybe just kind of briefly walk through the left nav and just kind of give a highlight of, the areas within the platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll kind of see the way we have everything structured is with a high level left nav here, and then as as submenus need to be created, we populate them right next to it, as you may have noticed. In the dashboard, we obviously don't have anything that is just sort of reporting here, but as we go into each of the different modules on the left sides here, we have the ability to kind of do the various functions inside of that module. So all of the new features that we've released today, or earlier this week, I should say, are really all incorporated into the assets module here. And so each of the different components that you see here are different aspects that we've been talking about today. From the segmenting perspective, or the microsegmentation standpoint, we have similarly, now we have that context with its submenus. And so here is the dashboarding for Enclave and the microsegmentation aspects. We can also look at each individual Enclave, and this is where the actual work happens, right? So this is where we can take one person and add them to another system. Say there's another oops, that was not the button I meant to click. We can go through here and add new ports, or add new accesses to systems. Say there's another port on here that only the NIC user needed access to. So now I have that and it's created. Just as simply, I can take that away and delete that. So these configurations get generated here and then pushed down to all of the agents, and that's essentially how we're controlling all of this. That's like the core piece here. So all of these different functions have just different aspects in this system. Alerts is what we had talked about earlier, when I can send out those things out to a SOC or a NOC for that visibility. So we're not investigating inside of our platform, right? We can do some level of investigation here. There is a dashboard for it, but really the intention is to pump all of this stuff into another place that's collecting that information and doing that analysis. Labels are really just different groupings that we can create inside of the system. Typically, what we do here is pull these from if there is an asset management system already in play and we're integrating with that, we'll pull in that information. Or as I discussed earlier, the IAM system, right? If there's an identity access management system in play, we'll utilize that. We'll pull the user and group information across here, and it'll populate our labels section. We also have the various settings that you can kind of mess with for each of these things. I won't go into detail with all of these things. It's just specific user configurations that you can set across the board. You can think of it like, so here are firewall presets. We can set times for how long users can stay connected to a resource without having to re-authenticate, things of that nature. Then, these last two here, nodes and users, are really just identifying all of the users that have access to the different devices inside of the network. So you could think of this as our internal IAMS system. Again, it's not really an identity and access management system because we're only handling the identity and access inside of Enclave. We're not pushing that out anywhere else. But we can control all of that here. An interesting thing that actually pops up quite a bit with IAMS is that not everybody's in the IAMS. Right. So if you have contractors or third parties, we actually have the ability to work with both. Right. So we can turn on the IAMS integration. We can pull in all of your native users. And then if you do have third parties that aren't part of your IAMS system, we can add them individually to our system here. And if they did need that access, we can grant it through this system. So it's some interesting kind of scenarios here that we can kind of play with. There's a lot of flexibility in the system that we really tried to think through and build in.
So Nick, I think that's a really great point to kind of like hone in on. So you've got a regular organization that is using Active Directory for instance, and they've got all of their structure, they've got all of their people in there. So instead of having to onboard a third-party contractor that's maybe on for a couple of months for a specific project, we can grant them their access directly through Enclave to just the resources that they need to be able to access without having to add them to Active Directory, remove the permissions they're not supposed to have within Active Directory in any fashion, and really just manage their access on a temporary basis inside of Enclave, again, without having to touch Active Directory, AWS, or anything else. Really kind of keep that third party as a third party to the access management system that an organization is currently using. I think that is a phenomenal opportunity for a lot of organizations to really be able to relook at how do they handle third-party risk as presented by contractors, service providers, and others. And when you look at regulations like what the SEC is looking for, what HIPAA is looking for, what DoD and the new CMMC standards are looking for, there's a real focus on what are third parties' risk posed to you as an organization. And I think this solves for quite a bit of that.
Yeah, exactly, Brian. And I didn't want to force anybody into a certain way, right? I wasn't thinking like, hey, I have the best process for this. You should use my process. I really wanted to make this as flexible as possible, right? So if you did want to, if the process for your organization is to bring them into the IAM system, great. Use the IAM system, integrate, and that's it. If that's not the process, then great. Add them into the Enclave web interface or any of the different ways to add somebody into our system, and then we can manage it that way. So yeah, absolutely. It was really thinking about how do we work within processes that already exist to make as little disruption as possible.
And we have the ability within this, right? Say I got a third-party contractor and I've added them through Enclave, and I want them only to be able to access these 2 or 3 systems inside of my environment. And we're managing them just through Enclave. We're not integrating them. We're not adding them into the AD. Talk to me about the level of security I can apply to that contractor. Can I apply another level of 2-factor authentication to that individual? Can I force that outside of what the standard requirements are within the organization, if they even exist? Can I allow a contractor to access only by using 2FA, thus better securing my environment?
Absolutely. And actually we run that out of default, right? So we run on a higher security setting by default out of the box. So as somebody is brought into the network here, we immediately have email authentication, email 2-factor authentication turned on. So what this will do is it'll send it, a one-time code to your email, just like you get in any other system. And as you're connecting, you'll be requested to enter in that code. We also have a number of other controls here. We can whitelist what IPs that user is coming from or that node. We can do both on both sides of the fence here. So that will allow us to limit where that person can come from. If we know their location and it's not changing, or we only want them to come from a location, we can set that here. The other abilities that we have are using, a TOTP or a temporary one-time password. That's like the authenticator applications that exist out there from Microsoft, Duo, Okta, Authy, any of those that you want to do that'll suck in this QR code and give you that registration process. So we can handle that as well. And then finally, we also have hardware authentication devices here. So anything that's following the YubiKey standard, or I'm sorry, the FIDO2 standard, things like YubiKey that exists out there, we can handle those as well.
So the ability to really secure connections within Enclave and using Enclave to environments is native capabilities available today out of the platform, in the platform, however you want to look at it, right? I mean, we're security professionals. We've been practitioners in this space for a long time. So this is how we think. This is exactly what Nick and the team have been able to integrate in here, because these are the things that we expect and we're demanding and we're looking for. And we know very well that this is what the environments out there in organizations that are searching for solutions, these are the types of things that they're looking for as well. So it's great to see that you've got multiple different levels or different styles of authentication allowable. It's great to be able to have default on as a MFA requirement. And I love how easy it is to be able to navigate this, to be able to make any of these happen and turn them on to better secure your environment. I do want to touch on real quick, and Nick, I'm going to ask you if I can share my screen for a second. Really, the controls that we are looking at inside of an environment that are met, and this is some great work we had put together by Lauren on our team. And what I'm really kind of sharing now, hopefully, is, and we see it's not showing on my screen for whatever reason, but
we can see it, Brian.
You can see
excellent. The joys of technology sometimes, especially when you're live. We looked at, when you implement Enclave, what does that actually do? And the thing you're not going to hear from SideChannel is marketing fluff about reducing mean time to breach by 17% or something like that. There is no control in the world that I've ever talked to a board or an auditor about that is looking for that. What they're looking for and what CISOs are looking for, what I think good security programs are built on, are controls and frameworks. What are they tactically doing? What are they technically doing once implemented? And we're going to help you figure that out, because we've already mapped. When you implement Enclave, this is what it does. So you can look at, and we're starting with the CIS set of controls because we're a big fan of them. We know that they work and they're a good roadmap to building out a good program. But we've already mapped and looked at what are the 35 controls that we've identified inside of CIS, Center for Internet Security, version 8, that can be met when you implement Enclave and are using the features that are in there. So we'll have this available on the website. I'll be posting this on LinkedIn as well. But you can see that we've really kind of honed in. Okay, look, we were able to maintain a detailed asset inventory. We're able to address unauthorized assets. We're able to use active discovery tool, passive discovery tools. I don't want to read through all 35. You get the idea. But we've really kind of honed in on, well, what does this do when implemented? And now think about, I've implemented Enclave in an organization. I now have the ability to turn around and tell an auditor or tell my risk team or tell a customer, hey, I'm meeting this standard. And we're already helping you get there by identifying which of the controls are actually met already. And we'll do this across a number of other standards and other frameworks. So we make it very easy for you to know what you're getting out of the Enclave product. I think that's a real differentiator. You just don't see a lot of other products out there. I know me as a buyer, when I was a CISO, this was a huge area that I was always searching for. And I ended up having to do this work myself to be able to then turn around and tell whoever it was, this is the ROI on what we just purchased. This is the controls that we're meeting, Mr. Auditor or Mrs. Auditor. And again, we just want to do the legwork because this is what we know. This is where we live. And we think this is what's really needed. So Nick, I don't know if you want to head back to a screen share of the platform, but I felt this was really good to kind of point out kind of where we were. And we've got about 5-10 more minutes left on a live. So I'll look for any questions in the chat while you bring us back into the platform.
Yeah, and one other thing that I do want to just hit on again, as Brian mentioned it, but we can really map anything to any of the standards. We have the core mappings down. We know the functionality and how they would map to other frameworks. So if you do need CMMC level 1 or 2, or maybe 3, even if that's anybody's doing that, or you do need CSF, or you do need HIPAA, like that, those are easy for us to generate. So just go ahead and ask, and our marketing team has all that stuff set up. So didn't want to just double tap on that one.
Excellent. No questions from the group. Do want to thank everybody for being on. I got a lot of private messages coming through on LinkedIn. is there anything else we want to touch on? Any components that we felt we missed that would be really useful for this audience?
Really just want to touch back on, the core concept here, and we really try to follow, other methodologies of getting to a zero trust, sort of philosophy or program, a program based on zero trust methodologies. And that's really kind of what we want to do, right? So it's that identify, analyze, and then protect. Like that's really kind of what we're keying in on, are those three kind of components inside of our system. So as we're doing this and building things out, that's the methodology that we're following and trying to, push through the UI here in the platform.
And then obviously the current capabilities that exist to do microsegmentation, right? So while we've released all these new features, we can't forget about the ability that this sets us all up to be able to then segment into enclaves, as we call them, your entire environment. You don't necessarily have to start with that. You can start with asset inventory and vulnerability discovery and detection and management, and then use that to move your prioritized or critical business assets into more secure enclaves with a variety of the capabilities that we showed you here. I think that's a good way to think about kind of where you need to start. You need to understand what you have. You need to understand what's vulnerable. You need to understand what's not vulnerable. What are critical assets to your organization that only really you can understand and tell us, right? And then segmenting and moving towards a path of zero trust off of that. If anybody wants to reach out to us, you can obviously direct message me, Trent, or Nick on LinkedIn. You can find us on SideChannel.com. You can check out the product, SideChannel.com/enclave. We've got a great new website, product position. We've got a great team that would love to talk to you about what exactly your need is with this solution. We can walk you through an in-depth demo, do a proof of concept. We can kind of talk through, help you better understand how Enclave can solve some of the problems that we think you might have, because we're seeing it in other organizations. So feel free to reach out. You can also email sales@sidechannel.com. I'm sure Trent and the team will be happy to jump on the call, go over what your use case is, and see how we can work with you and help you on securing your environment. Gentlemen, any last rounds, if we will?
No, really appreciate everyone jumping on here today and doing this with us. To Brian's point, feel free to reach out to us, myself directly, or sales@sidechannel.com. And thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone. Really appreciate the time.
Yeah, I'm Brian Hoagley. And on behalf of Nick and Trent and the entire team at SideChannel, we want to thank you all for your time. Enjoy the day. Have a great weekend. You'll be able to catch this as a replay if you want in the future. It will be linked as soon as this LinkedIn Live ends. Please feel free to share this with your colleagues and others and gain some insight and ask us some questions. We really do truly love customer feedback, any other type of feedback into the products that we're building. It makes them better because you are the user, and we just want to hear from you. So please feel free to reach out and be good, be safe, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, everybody.